Are you ready?
It's gonna be a hot girl disco summer. Wait, I'm never doing that again. I apologize. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Here, let's fix it. Something cool. What is up, YouTube? What is up, fantasy football fam? I'm back. I got you guys on a fantastic video, and I'm telling you right now, Week 10 is the breaking point. You got injuries, bye weeks, frustration. This is where fantasy managers start panicking and making safe lineup decisions, and that's how they lose. This week is not about safe. This week is about opportunity, and I'm telling you right now, the advantage is in the matchups that nobody else is paying attention to. Nobody but you and me, because you're watching this, so you're welcome. Let's get weird. I've got 12 sleepers who are not just cute upside plays. These are players stepping into role shifts, advantageous matchups based on scheme, injury replacements, and matchup exploits to help you dominate this week. And all of this is because we took over 18 hours to research the Week 10 slate. And I assure you, these sleepers are all about to smash in your Week 10 lineups. So without further ado, guys, as always, let's get weird. All right, so before we get into your Week 10 sleepers, we need to recap how our Week 9 sleepers went. The reason why we're going to do this is because transparency and accountability is very, very important. It's very crucial. And here at Big Draft Energy, we don't victory lap without receipts. And we had a great Week 9 sleepers slate that absolutely dominated your lineups. We had Juan Jennings, who was our number one. He finished as a wide receiver 26, 14.1 PPR fantasy points, and everything that we talk about, guys, is PPR format. We had Kyler Murray or Jacoby Brissett. They finished as QB. Jacoby finished as QB 10, 24.8 fantasy points. Absolutely electric. Great call. One of our misses was Zach Ertz. He finished as the tight end 22, 8.6 fantasy points. We called Bashal Tutin. We also called Bashal Tutin for a juicy anytime touchdown. He hit 9.6 fantasy points, finished as an RB 24, so we like that. Colston Loveland, absolutely smashed. He finished as a tight end 2 with 29.8 fantasy points. Mark Andrews finished as a tight end 5 with 16.6 fantasy points. Aaron Rodgers was another one of our misses. He was the QB 21, 12.1 fantasy points. It was a weird game script, weird game in general. We were the only ones saying JJ McCarthy to the freaking moon, and he delivered in such a way. He finished as a QB 13 with 22.2 fantasy points. Tyrone Tracy was our third and final miss of the slate. He finished as the RB 35, 6.7 fantasy points. And then our last one, he should have done better, but he still did really good, finishing as the RB26, and that was Olamide Zaccheaus. He finished with 8.8 fantasy points. Everybody was telling you to start Bam Knight. I said, no, don't start Bam Knight. Bam Knight didn't even get half the production that Demario did. I said Demario was going to be the more explosive back, and he was. And, you know, it was a very serviceable 8.8 fantasy points. I mean, he outproduced Jonathan Taylor. Now, with that being said, let's talk about our Week 10 sleepers. As I said before, we got 12 of these guys. So we're going to start with Thursday Night Football. We actually have two players from the same team. We like Troy Franklin, and we also like Evan Engram versus Las Vegas. Why? Because Vegas allows the sixth most fantasy points to the wide receiver position at 36.50, and the fourth most fantasy points allowed on the season at 38.48. Why are we talking about Evan Engram? Because based off of alignment, Evan Engram lines up in the slot 48.3% of his snaps, and the next closest is Franklin. He goes at 50.9%. And the reason why we're talking about the slot and attacking the slot position is because the Las Vegas Raiders give up the second most fantasy points to slot backs on a weekly basis. So we like them to absolutely dominate. They give up just over 18 fantasy points. So yeah, I like both of these guys to smash. I like both of these guys as a sleeper. This next guy is Jalen Nailor versus Baltimore. And I'm going to tell you right now, Baltimore has improved in the last 4 weeks. They started off as one of the most advantageous matchups on a weekly basis for wide receivers, but now it's 20th in the last 4 weeks. They've improved drastically. I know they've only played 3 games. But here's where it's very advantageous and why we like Jalen Nailor. They give up the fourth most points to slot receivers at 15.4, and this is consistent, and it's been happening even since they've improved drastically. They're still very weak against the slot position. Nailor has over 55% of his snaps coming from the slot position, leading all wide receivers. I believe next closest is Jordan Addison at 27%, and then Justin Jefferson at 25%. So I think he has a sneaky upside. He's a sneaky volume play, and he's leading Minnesota in all the slot rate metrics that we think matter and how we could project moving forward. Next, we like Isaiah Likely in that same matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, not only because they're bottom 12 against the tight end position over the last 4 weeks and on the season, but because his usage is getting higher and higher, and the reliability and trust that we see between him and Lamar Jackson is back, and it's back in such a way. I like Isaiah Likely. We like Likely. We like Likely for an anytime touchdown this week as well. I think he's smashed. I think he's going to smash. He has top 12 upside. Next, we got two players from the same game again. We got Davis Mills and we got Dalton Schultz. Why do we like Davis Mills? Because Jacksonville gives up the third most fantasy points to quarterbacks within the last 4 weeks, 24.45. And they've allowed the sixth most fantasy points to the position on the entire season. That is consistency. They have not improved. They've only gotten worse. This is a plus situation, plus matchup for him. Why do we like Dalton Schultz? Because over the last 3 matchups that the Jaguars defense has played, they have been number 1 in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. So we like Dalton Schultz in a smash spot. And even when Davis Mills came in, we saw a lot of the targets going to Dalton Schultz's way. And Dalton Schultz has been really good, and everybody wrote him off. He was a round 20 pick in fantasy football best ball drafts. Next, we got TreVeyon Henderson versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa is leaking RB production, top 7 most points allowed on the season, predominantly in the receiving game against the Todd Bowles secondary. They give up 2 receiving backs, a lot of reception upside, receiving yard upside, and sometimes even chunk plays that end up in touchdown production. And we like TreVeyon Henderson in this spot because last week we said that TreVeyon Henderson's receiving yards prop, which was 15.5 yards, was an absolute smash. He doubled that number in just the first quarter within the first 2 series. So we love TreVeyon Henderson. We love all of his receptions and receiving yards and longest reception prop as well. Same game, we got 2 other Patriots. We like Demario Douglas and we like Hunter Henry. Demario Douglas, he stepped up huge. He finished as a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football this past week when Keyshawn Boutte went out. And when you look at what the Tampa Bay secondary allows, they allow the 12th most fantasy points to slot receivers. They give up just over 12 fantasy points there in that department. And Douglas leads the Patriots wide receivers with 120 snaps from the slot. And then when we're looking at all the pass catchers for the Patriots, Hunter Henry, that's why we like him. He leads all Patriots players with 131 snaps from the slot. And when Boutte went out, we saw an uptick in usage there. So we like both Demario Douglas and Hunter Henry and TreVeyon Henderson to all have very productive outputs this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. This next one, and he's on our thumbnail, this one's going to come as a shock to many, but I've gone out and I messaged guys like Pat Fitzmaurice, Derek Brown, that this week's tight end one is going to be Taysom Hill. I'm not just saying he's a startable player. I'm saying he's your tight end one. Okay. Why? Because Carolina is vulnerable to both the RB and the tight end. Since we don't trust Kamara and his usage, and we don't love any pass catcher upside with Shuck throwing the rock, Taysom Hill is primed to be the triple threat of running, catching, and passing. No other player in fantasy, especially in the flex position or tight end spot, gives you the upside that Taysom Hill does this week. Taysom Hill, this is his cheat code week, and you heard it here first. So make sure you guys smash a like and subscribe. All right. Next, we got Olamide Zaccheaus against the New York Giants. On the season, the Giants have given up the 7th most fantasy points in PPR format to wide receivers, allowing 36.76. And the last 4 weeks, they've kept that up, allowing 31.20. And once again, targeting that slot upside, right? The Giants give up the 9th most fantasy points allowed to slot wide receivers, 11.8. Zaccheaus has the most snaps for Chicago at 166. That's 59.66% of his snaps. And then Rome Odunze has the 2nd most, but he's not a sleeper. He was just asleep last week. Okay, so we like both Rome and like also Zaccheaus, but we love Zaccheaus this week. I think Zaccheaus is a fantastic way. Like, he's available in a lot of leagues, you should pick him up. Side note, we also like Wan'Dale Robinson for similar upside in the slot position against the Chicago Bears, but Wan'Dale Robinson doesn't quantify and categorize as a sleeper, so we're just going to stick with sleepers. Next sleeper, this guy's a deep sleeper, especially if Puka Nacua misses. We like Jordan Whittington versus San Francisco because San Francisco over the last 4 weeks has given up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers, allowing 37.80. And on the season, they've given up the 6th most fantasy points to slot receivers, allowing 14.0 fantasy points per game. And Jordan Whittington leads with 144 snaps for the Los Angeles Rams. That's from the slot, that's over 56% of his snaps. Last but not least, we like Quintin Johnson versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Similar to why we liked Alec Pierce last week, it's because the Steelers give up the most fantasy production to the wide receiver position, not just on the year, not just on the last 4 weeks, but in general. On a weekly basis, you can rely on them to do that. So why not Keenan Allen? Why not Ladd McConkey? And I think they're all fantastic spots, and I'm tossing back and forth between Ladd McConkey or Quintin Johnson. But the reason why is when you look at the X wide receiver, they tend to dominate against the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Pittsburgh Steelers try to rely on their pass rush to get home, and they leave their corners and defensive backs in one-on-one coverage and one-on-one matchups. So you get one safety to help, and the safety often leads to helping the slot receiver or the boundary wide receiver. So we like the field side wide receiver. And when we're looking at almost 100% of his snaps, that is where Quintin Johnson lines up on a weekly basis. And his win rate is incredibly high. When you pair that with the fact that he absolutely dominates against man defense, and the Steelers run man defense at the 4th highest rate, over 40.46% of their plays, if Herbert can find time to chuck it deep, QJ is primed to absolutely dominate this week. And I don't think that like his upside is like a 10 fantasy. I think his upside is 30 fantasy points, multiple touchdowns. We like QJ. We like QJ a lot. Now, we didn't give you guys a lot of cute slides because, I mean, that takes a lot of fucking time to put out there. So instead, we decided to just give you guys the information and double down our time on our research to facilitate and help you guys dominate your fantasy football matchups in week 10. As always, shout out to our sponsors, Drafters Fantasy. Use promo code DISCO to double your first deposit, dollar for dollar, up to $100. Shout out to my business partner, Sleazebomb. We are partnered up on what's called the Guys FF Patreon, GUYZ. And it is one of the greatest, fastest growing fantasy football communities of like-minded individuals who get elite, top-notch access to both myself and my business partner, Sleazebomb, getting constant, great advice for a very affordable price, starting at $5 a month. It's incredible. The community is growing, a lot of positivity, a lot of good stuff going there. You guys get access to us 24/7. You guys get our phone numbers. We'll literally get on a video call with you and look not just at your lineup and how you can improve your lineup, but we'll look at every other team in your league to see if there's a trade upgrade that we could possibly attack together. We give you guys dynasty advice, buy lows, sell highs. We give you guys waiver wire. Like before we give any of these recorded videos, everybody in the Patreon and Discord gets access first. We'll answer all of your start sits before we do anything. Shout out to our sponsors, Bull Rush. Shout out to our sponsors, Better Vision. There's no better place to consolidate all of your fantasy football lineups, your DFS, your betting, all into one app. You don't have to have 69 apps open. It's literally consolidated into one spot. The best place to sweat it all. You guys can catch us for our live start sit shows every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then we also have a huge show every Saturday, and it's been incredibly successful, where I'm joined by Sleaze and Who Hames, and then we always have like a special fourth who comes in this week. Our special fourth is actually Joe Frick, who's one of the sharpest fantasy football minds on the planet. We absolutely love Joe Frick, and he and I are incredibly competitive. We're in this Brainy Ballers contest. Nevertheless, guys, time for the best outro on fantasy football. Catch us live Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. If you guys like the video, like the video. If you haven't subscribed yet, help support the dream. The best way you guys can help me continue put this product out is by subscribing. Please subscribe. It means the absolute world to me, guys. Thank you guys for making this dream as a content creator come true. Until next time, best outro in fantasy football. Peace.